You wake up, check your phone, go to work, come back home, repeat. And deep inside, a quiet voice asks, "Is this really it?" You're not ungrateful. You're just disconnected from something essential, something ancient, something that gave meaning to even the smallest act. And in a world obsessed with progress, we've forgotten the one thing the soul truly needs: purpose. James Hillman saw it coming, and what he said might finally help you remember what you were born for. Part A1: The Myth of Progress and the Forgotten Soul. We live in the age of more. More productivity, more data, more goals. And yet, in the quiet moments, late at night or early in the morning, many people feel it. That hollow echo inside. Not depression exactly, not burnout either. Something subtler, a slow disconnection from meaning. It's strange, isn't it? Modern life has solved so many problems. Longer lifespans, more comfort, more access, and still, you sit on your couch, scrolling endlessly, and wonder why nothing feels sacred anymore. James Hillman called it the great flattening of the soul. When everything becomes functional, optimized, and external, something essential is lost. That something is purpose, but not the kind you find in to-do lists or LinkedIn posts. Hillman wasn't interested in that version. He believed we each carry an image, a unique calling, from birth, a deep, invisible thread pulling us toward what we're meant to become. But modern culture teaches us to ignore that voice. Instead, we learn to chase achievement, approval, and performance. Hillman's question wasn't, "What do you want to do with your life?" It was deeper. What does your soul want from you? And here's the painful part. Most people never stop to ask. We rush into careers. We follow scripts. We confuse success with alignment. And slowly, purpose becomes performance. The myth of progress replaces the myth of the soul. Hillman saw this as the core wound of our time. He argued that purpose isn't something we invent. It's something we remember. And in forgetting it, we forget ourselves. Carl Jung shared a similar idea. He called it the process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, beyond the masks you've worn to survive. But Hillman added something crucial. He believed this purpose, or calling, is not always grand or logical. Sometimes it's irrational, symbolic, even mythic. He spoke of the acorn theory, the belief that just like an oak tree comes from an acorn, each person is born with a seed of their true nature. That seed carries a shape, a style, a daemon, a guiding force. And that daemon doesn't care about your resume. It cares about your truth. So the real question becomes, are you living from your myth or someone else's? If you've ever felt like something is missing, even when everything looks fine on the outside, that might be your daemon whispering. And in the next section, we'll explore how exactly modern life disconnects you from that voice, and what Hillman believed we must recover to feel truly alive again. How modern life silences the soul. In a world obsessed with productivity, purpose is repackaged as performance. From a young age, we're taught to ask the wrong questions. How can I be useful? What job will make me successful? How do I fit in? But Hillman would say, those aren't questions of the soul. They're questions of the system. The modern world conditions us to trade depth for speed, curiosity for certainty, mystery for measurement. Think about it. When was the last time you were encouraged to explore who you truly are, without needing to monetize it, label it, or explain it? In school, we learn how to pass tests. In work, we learn how to deliver results. In life, we learn how to appear happy. But purpose doesn't live in appearances. Hillman warned that modern life creates a pathology of the literal, a culture that mistrusts the symbolic, the poetic, the inner voice. And so the soul, that part of us that dreams, feels, and remembers, becomes silenced. You wake up, You go to work, you tick boxes, and yet, a part of you drifts further from meaning each day. This isn't your fault. It's a cultural inheritance. We are raised in systems that reward external alignment, even if it costs us internal truth. You're praised for being efficient, not for being authentic, for producing, not for becoming. And this is exactly how the soul starts to disappear. It retreats, not because it's weak, but because the environment no longer speaks its language. Hillman believed that when we ignore the soul, symptoms begin to appear. Not just anxiety or depression, but a kind of existential numbness. You feel like you're living someone else's life. You forget why you started. You stop dreaming. Even your goals begin to feel hollow. This is what Hillman called soul loss. Not a dramatic breakdown, but a slow forgetting of who you really are. It often hides behind phrases like, "I don't know what I want anymore. I just feel empty. I've achieved everything, but I still feel lost." Have you ever said those things to yourself? That's not failure. That's your soul knocking. And here's something even more important. In Hillman's view, your symptoms are not the problem. They're the message. They are your inner world's way of saying, something vital is missing. And it's time to go back. But go back to what? To the deeper story, to the forgotten dream, to the daemon, the inner guide who's been waiting for you all along. In Part 3, we'll explore how Hillman believed you can begin listening to your soul again, and how to reconnect with your original myth, even after years of living in someone else's narrative. Listening to the soul again. Hillman's way back. So how do we find our way back? After all the noise, the productivity traps, and the hollow achievements? How do we hear the soul again? James Hillman believed this return doesn't happen through effort, but through attention, because the soul never really leaves. It just gets buried under the weight of all the things we were told to care about. And that's where your work begins. Not in chasing the next big thing, but in becoming quiet enough to hear what's already inside you. Hillman said the soul speaks through images, not logic. Through mood, not metrics. It whispers, it doesn't shout. So if you want to hear it, you have to slow down. Start with the questions no one asks anymore. What was I drawn to as a child, before I was told what was useful? What kind of beauty moves me in ways I can't explain? What inner conflict do I keep avoiding, but still carries weight in my chest? These are not just reflections. These are maps. Hillman didn't believe your purpose is something you choose. He believed it's something that chooses you. And his metaphor for that idea was radical. He called it the acorn theory, the belief that you are born with a seed, a blueprint of who you were meant to be. Before culture, before roles, before expectations. Inside you, there's a pattern trying to unfold. Not one imposed by the outside, but one planted deep within the soul. Your task? To become the guardian of that pattern. To remember, not invent. But here's the tragedy of modern life. We tell people to find their passion by looking outside themselves, through job titles, social media aesthetics, or lifestyle brands. We ask teens to choose careers before they've even listened to what calls them. We reward conformity and call it success. And then we wonder why so many people feel numb. That numbness isn't laziness, it's grief. It's the soul's quiet mourning for the life it was meant to live. Hillman would say, if you feel lost, unfulfilled, or disconnected, it's not because you're broken. It's because your soul has been exiled, silenced, or misunderstood. And here's the twist. The signs of soul loss don't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like constant low-grade anxiety, a career that looks good on paper but feels hollow, a smile that never quite reaches your eyes, a life that functions but doesn't mean anything. These aren't just emotional discomforts. They're symptoms, messages. Hillman believed the soul will always try to communicate, even if it has to use suffering to get your attention. But once you realize that, once you stop pathologizing your sadness and start listening to it, everything shifts. Because now your pain isn't the problem, it's the portal. And when you begin to ask, what is my soul asking for? Instead of, how do I fix myself? You step onto a different path, a deeper one. In part 4, we'll explore what happens when you abandon your inner myth, and how to recognize the hidden signs that you've been living someone else's story. Signs. You've abandoned your myth. Recognizing that you've stepped away from your personal myth isn't always obvious. In fact, it often hides behind everyday habits and emotions we've come to normalize. James Hillman would say these are the soul's quiet messages, not punishments, but wake-up calls. So how do you know when you've strayed from your inner path? Here are some of the most common signs. Chronic dissatisfaction. No matter what you achieve, it never feels like enough. You chase goal after goal, but the finish line keeps moving. There's always a next step, but never a sense of arrival. Constant comparison. You can't stop looking sideways. Your worth feels tied to how you're doing relative to others, not how aligned you are with your own truth. Subtle resentment. You smile on the outside, but inside, you're bitter. Bitter at your job, bitter at your routine, bitter at yourself for following a path that was never yours. Fantasies of escape. You imagine quitting it all and disappearing, not to rest, but to begin again. Not to relax, but to finally feel alive. A deadness in joy. Even the things that once lit you up now feel muted. It's like tasting food with a numb tongue. The form is there, but the flavor is gone. If you felt any of these, you're not alone. Hillman believed this emptiness is the soul signaling that you're living someone else's myth. A story imposed, not chosen. Maybe it's the good son story, the high-achieving daughter, the provider, the peacemaker, the golden child. These aren't random roles. They're often inherited from family, from culture, from trauma. And they come with rewards, approval, stability, safety. But they also come at a cost, your essence. Because the longer you live out a myth that isn't yours, the more your soul withers from neglect. And what happens when a soul is ignored for too long? It rebels. Not always dramatically, but persistently. Sometimes in the form of burnout that no vacation can fix, or in a vague sadness that therapy can't label, or in a sudden yearning for something you can't quite name. This isn't self-sabotage, it's soul sabotage. The inner myth refusing to be forgotten. Hillman's work teaches us that the soul will never stop whispering, even if you pretend not to hear. It will keep showing up in your dreams, your discomforts, your longings. But here's the good news. The moment you start listening, the myth stirs again. You don't need to burn your life down. You don't need to know the full path. You just need to turn inward and ask differently. Instead of, what should I do with my life? Ask, what story wants to live through me? Because your purpose isn't a goal to accomplish, it's a pattern to embody. It's not about productivity, it's about presence. And when you start honoring even the smallest signals, the books you're drawn to, the memories that haunt you, the activities that make you forget time, you're stepping back into the story that was always yours. In Part 5, we'll explore how to begin reclaiming that myth. Not through force, but through devotion. And how the most profound transformation doesn't come from fixing your life, but from remembering your soul. Reclaiming your myth. The soul's quiet path. Back. If you've come this far, it means something inside you is already remembering. Not with logic, but with longing. This isn't about reinventing yourself from scratch. It's about rediscovering who you were before the world told you who to be. James Hillman said, We need a psychology that returns soul to the world. So how do you begin that return? 1. Start with reverence, not urgency. Your myth doesn't respond to panic. It responds to presence. You don't need to force a breakthrough. You need to create sacred space for listening. That means slowing down, sitting in silence, letting your inner voice speak, without interrupting it with productivity. Purpose doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through what moves you, what you notice, what you care about, what keeps you awake at night. 2. Follow the trail of fascination. Your myth leaves breadcrumbs. It's hidden in your childhood obsessions, your persistent daydreams, the moments when time disappears because you feel fully alive. Don't dismiss these things as random. They are mythic clues. Hillman argued that the soul doesn't grow through systems or step-by-step programs. It grows through image, emotion, imagination. So ask yourself, what images keep recurring in my life? What themes show up in my dreams? What parts of me have I silenced to be accepted? 3. Stop measuring your life by external standards. The myth isn't linear. It doesn't care about how impressive your resume looks. It doesn't speak in metrics or milestones. It asks deeper questions. Is your life aligned with your essence? Are you living a story that feels honest to your soul? If the answer is no, that's not failure, that's clarity. 4. Honor your soul wound. Hillman believed that what breaks us often reveals our myth. Your pain isn't in the way. It is the way, not as suffering for its own sake, but as a portal to deeper knowing. Sometimes, the thing you're most ashamed of becomes the doorway to your purpose. The family pattern you vowed to break. The identity you've hidden. The betrayal that cracked your heart open. These aren't accidents. They're initiations. 5. Accept that myth isn't a destination. It's a devotion. You don't find your purpose once and for all. You return to it, over and over, like tending a sacred fire. Some days it burns bright. Other days it flickers. But you keep showing up. Because this isn't about becoming someone extraordinary. It's about remembering the sacredness of your ordinary soul. When you reclaim your myth, you stop chasing a life that looks good and start living one that feels true. Not every choice will make sense to others, but it doesn't have to. Your myth is not a brand. It's a bond between you and your soul. So instead of asking, "What's the next big thing?" try asking, "What would be the most honest next step?" Because at the end of the day, success isn't how far you go. It's how closely you followed the call of your myth. Even when the world tried to distract you with noise. And maybe that's what James Hillman meant all along. You don't need a map. You need a mirror. A mirror that reflects back the myth you were born with. The one still waiting, patiently, for you to say yes.